The jungle was alive that morning in 1968. Thick vines hung like traps. Every shadow whispered danger, and the air was so heavy with heat and fear it felt impossible to breathe. I was just 19, my boots sinking into the mud, rifle trembling in my hands. The sound of cicadas and distant gunfire blended into a single haunting chorus. My heart pounded louder than any bullet could. Every step forward felt like stepping into the unknown one wrong move, and it could all be over. I could hear my sergeant's voice echoing in my head. Stay sharp. Trust no silence. But silence was all around me, pressing against my ears, making me wonder if the enemy was already watching. My first day in the Vietnam jungle was not a battle yet. It was survival, a test of nerves, of spirit, of whether I could even last until nightfall. And as I wiped the sweat from my eyes, I realized this was not just war.
What was that?
It was a world of shadows, and I had just stepped inside. The first time I stepped off the transport and felt the thick air of Vietnam, it struck me like a wall. It wasn't just heat, it was weight, pressing down on my chest, seeping into my uniform, clinging to my skin. Back home in the States, I thought I knew what summer was like, but nothing prepared me for this. The humidity wrapped around me like a wet blanket, and every breath felt like I was inhaling steam. I was 19, barely a man, and yet the army had already shipped me halfway across the world into a place I only knew from headlines and grainy news footage. Vietnam, a word that carried with it equal parts duty, confusion, and dread. I'd grown up hearing my father talk about his war, how he had carried a rifle in Korea, how serving your country was a man's obligation. But when my draft letter arrived, my chest went hollow. I tried to look proud in front of my family, but inside, fear gnawed at me. Those first days before we moved into the jungle, the base itself felt unreal. Rows of tents and sandbags, the constant thrum of helicopters overhead, the smell of diesel and sweat, the clatter of boots on dirt. There was no silence here, only noise, the buzzing of insects, the crackling of radios, the occasional boom of artillery somewhere out beyond the perimeter. And yet, despite the chaos, there was routine. We were issued gear, checked our rifles, drilled endlessly, trying to believe that muscle memory could stand in for courage. I remember staring at my helmet for a long time the night before my first patrol. It wasn't just a piece of gear, it was a symbol. Once I put it on, there was no turning back. I traced my fingers over the rough surface, thinking about home, about my mother's cooking, about the girl I left behind who promised she would write. I didn't know if I'd ever see those things again. The other men in my unit tried to act tough, cracking jokes, smoking cigarettes, pretending the war was just another job. But in the quiet moments, I could see it, the same fear I carried, mirrored in their eyes. None of us wanted to admit it out loud, but we all knew. Tomorrow could be our last sunrise. When dawn came, the jungle was waiting. From the moment we set foot beyond the wire, the world changed. Civilization dropped away behind us, and in its place rose a wall of green. The trees were enormous, their roots twisting like snakes across the ground. Vines hung down like ropes, sometimes catching your helmet or your rifle if you weren't careful. The ground was soft, sucking at your boots with every step, as if the earth itself wanted to pull you under. The air was alive with sound chirping, buzzing, rustling. It should have been ordinary, just nature being nature. But to us, every sound carried suspicion. Was that just a bird in the canopy, or was someone watching us? Was that rustle in the grass a snake, or the enemy moving quietly? Every noise made my heart jump. Every silence felt louder than gunfire. And then there was the smell. A heavy mix of damp earth, rotting vegetation, and something metallic, like rust that never washed away. It clung to you, got into your clothes, your hair, your skin. No matter how many showers you took back at base, the jungle never left you. I kept glancing at the men around me, trying to read their faces. My sergeant, a man hardened by 2 tours already, looked like he was carved from stone. His eyes scanned every tree line, every shadow. He never let his guard down, not for a second. Then there were the new guys like me, fresh from training, trying to mimic his calm but failing. I could see their hands trembling on their rifles, the sweat rolling down their temples. In training, we had been taught tactics, formations, how to react to ambushes, but nothing in the manuals prepared us for the feeling of being swallowed by the jungle. Out here, the rules were different. The enemy could be anywhere, everywhere, or nowhere at all. They knew the land, we didn't. They moved like ghosts. As the sun climbed higher, the heat became unbearable. My uniform stuck to my body. My canteen never seemed full enough, and every step drained me more. I began to wonder how anyone could survive a whole tour in this place. But beyond the heat, the fear, and the endless green, there was something else, a strange awareness that I was part of history. Each step I took wasn't just my own. It was a step in a conflict that stretched across continents, politics, and ideologies I barely understood. Back home, people were protesting, debating whether we should even be here. But in the jungle, none of that mattered. Out here, it was simple. Survive or don't. That first day, I learned quickly that Vietnam wasn't just a place. It was a test of patience, of stamina, of sanity. The jungle had a way of stripping you bare, showing you who you really were when the noise of everyday life was gone. And as I walked deeper into that green labyrinth, rifle clutched tight, 19 years old and terrified, I began to realize this was just the beginning. Crossing the wire felt like leaving one world and entering another. Behind me, the bass still rattled with the noise of engines, radios, and shouting voices. Ahead, the jungle loomed a solid wall of green that seemed alive, waiting for us. As soon as we stepped off the dirt track and into that massive vegetation, the air changed. The sky disappeared, replaced by a canopy so thick that only slivers of sunlight cut through. It was as if the jungle swallowed us whole. The sounds of the bass faded quickly, replaced by the constant hum of insects. It wasn't just background noise, it was a blanket of sound, heavy and relentless. Every chirp and buzz seemed amplified, pressing against my ears until I couldn't tell where one ended and another began. It made me feel small, like I didn't belong, like the land itself rejected me. Walking in formation, we moved slowly. Each man placed his boots carefully, avoiding roots, vines, and mud that could trip or trap us. The ground was soft and treacherous, sucking at our boots with every step. More than once, I felt as though the earth itself wanted to drag me down, to claim me before the enemy even had a chance. My pack weighed heavy, sweat running down my back until my shirt clung to me like it'd been painted on. The air was thicker here, filled with the smell of damp leaves, rotting wood, and something sour I couldn't place. It made breathing feel like work, each inhale thick and unsatisfying. I tried to stay quiet, to match the silence of the others, but my breath seemed too loud, my steps too clumsy. I glanced at the men around me. Some looked straight ahead, their faces masks of calm, but I saw the tension in their jaws, the stiffness in their shoulders. Others darted their eyes from side to side, unable to shake the feeling that we were being watched. My own nerves were raw, and I couldn't decide which was worse. The fear of stumbling into an ambush or the fear that nothing would happen at all, leaving me trapped in this endless march through shadows. Our sergeant led the way, moving with the kind of precision that comes only from experience. He didn't need to speak. His hand signals told us when to stop, when to move, when to stay low. Watching him gave me a fragile sense of security. If he looked steady, maybe I could be steady too. Still, even he seemed to glance often into the underbrush, as if daring it to reveal its secrets. Occasionally, a shaft of light would break through the canopy and illuminate the path, but those moments felt unnatural, almost cruel. The light revealed how dense the growth was, how far from home we truly were. It was a reminder that we were outsiders, intruders, in a place that belonged to someone else. Every sense was heightened. The crunch of a twig under my boot sounded like a gunshot. The brush of a vine against my arm made my heart leap, as if it were a snake ready to strike. Once, a bird exploded from the trees with a flurry of wings, and half our squad flinched, rifles lifting instinctively before we realized it was harmless. The laughter that followed was nervous, brittle, the kind that hides fear rather than erases it. Time moved strangely in the jungle. Minutes stretched into hours, each step identical to the last. The sameness of it wore at me, until I couldn't tell if we had been walking for 30 minutes or 3 hours. The jungle had no mercy, no markers, nothing to measure progress. It was just green, endless and smothering. By the time we paused for a short break, my legs ached, my shoulders burned, my nerves were frayed. Sitting in the damp earth brought no relief. The ground was alive with ants, and the air buzzed so loudly it was impossible to think. I stared into the trees, half expecting shapes to emerge, and wondered how anyone could last more than a single day here. That was my first lesson in the jungle. Survival wasn't about battles or bullets. It was about endurance. about holding steady when the land itself seemed determined to break you. As we resumed the patrol, the silence between us grew heavier. Nobody spoke. Even whispers seemed dangerous, like they might draw attention from unseen eyes. The jungle had a way of amplifying everything, not just sound, but fear. I kept my rifle close, my finger brushing the trigger guard, though I knew pulling it at the wrong time could mean disaster. Every rustle in the brush felt like an enemy crawling toward us. Every sudden silence from the insects felt like a warning. The jungle didn't just surround us, it tested us, teased us, daring us to slip, to reveal weakness. The first scare came suddenly. A soldier 2 men ahead of me slipped on a patch of wet ground. He fell hard, his gear clattering, the sound exploding in the stillness. Instantly, the entire line froze. Rifles came up, eyes darted in every direction. My breath caught in my throat, waiting for the crack of enemy fire that never came. The jungle remained indifferent, buzzing and chirping as if mocking us. When the fallen soldier scrambled back to his feet, flushed with embarrassment, the squad exhaled as one. Nobody laughed this time. The lesson was clear. One mistake could bring hell down on all of us. A little later, our point man raised a fist, signalling a halt. We froze again, bodies rigid. He crouched, pointing at the ground. I craned my neck and saw it 2 impressions in the mud. Faint but undeniable. Footprints, not ours. Not fresh enough to guarantee danger, but not old enough to ignore. My stomach knotted. Someone else had been here, moving through this same stretch not long before. We waited while the sergeant inspected the trail. His face gave nothing away, but his silence was enough to stake our nerves. Finally, he waved us forward, slower this time, more careful. The jungle pressed closer, as if it knew we were intruding on paths not meant for us. Every branch seemed sharper, every vine more like a trap. The buzzing of insects now felt like whispers, a language I couldn't understand but couldn't ignore. My pulse hammered so hard it felt like the jungle must hear it too. Then came the second scare. A flock of birds erupted from the canopy with a deafening burst of wings. The sudden chaos sent us crouching, rifles aimed, hearts pounding. For several long seconds, we held there, expecting the attack to follow. None came. Slowly, we lowered our weapons, but the damage was done. My hands shook so badly I had to grip my rifle tighter just to steady them. By now the heat was unbearable. Sweat blurred my vision, stung my eyes, soaked my uniform until it clung like a shroud. My throat was dry, my canteen already half empty, but I didn't dare drink too much. We didn't know how long the patrol would last, and thirst was easier to endure than panic. The sergeant's voice finally cut through, low and firm. "Stay sharp, don't trust the quiet." His words echoed in my head with every step, and the quiet was everywhere. At times, the jungle grew eerily still, as if even nature was holding its breath. Those were the worst moments, when my imagination filled the silence with invisible enemies, waiting just out of sight. We marched on, deeper and deeper, each man locked in his own battle against fear. By the time we stopped again, I realized my shoulders ached, not from the weight of my pack, but from the constant tension of expecting death at any second. That was my second lesson in the jungle. Fear wasn't something you escaped. It was something you carried, step after step, until it became part of you. The jungle had a way of tricking you into believing nothing would happen. Hours could pass with only the buzz of insects and the crunch of boots in the mud. The monotony lulled you, teased you into lowering your guard. That morning was no different. We had been moving for what felt like forever, sweat soaking through our uniforms, our senses dulled by the endless green walls around us. Our sergeant halted suddenly, raising a clenched fist. The line froze. I could feel my heartbeat quicken as silence settled over us. The jungle seemed to hold its breath. Even the birds stopped their calls. Something was wrong, terribly wrong. We crouched low, rifles raised, eyes darting through the shadows. The smell of damp earth filled my nose, mixed with the metallic tang of fear. I wiped the sweat from my brow, my hand trembling. My ears strained for anything, any hint of movement, any sound that didn't belong, and then it came. A crack, sharp and violent, split the silence. The air exploded with gunfire. Leaves shredded, branches snapped. The world erupted in chaos. Bullets whizzed past my head, thudding into the trees with deadly force. Someone screamed a high, panicked cry that was cut short by another burst of fire. "Ambush! Get down!" our sergeant roared, his voice nearly lost in the storm of sound. I dropped flat, my face slamming into the mud. The ground was cold, wet, clinging to me as I pressed myself into it, trying to vanish. My hands fumbled for my rifle, fingers slick with sweat and dirt. Training took over. I aimed blindly toward the flashes in the trees and pulled the trigger. The recoil jolted through my body, sharp and violent, but I kept firing, desperate to push the shadows back. The jungle roared with gunfire. Explosions shook the ground as grenades detonated, filling the air with acrid smoke. Visibility collapsed into a haze of green, grey, and red. Men shouted, cursed, screamed. Orders were barked, but drowned beneath the cacophony. It was impossible to tell where the enemy was or how many there were. All I knew was that death was everywhere, above, below, around us. To my left, a soldier I barely knew clutched his stomach, blood spilling between his fingers. His eyes were wide with disbelief, his mouth moving but no words coming out. Another man tried to drag him to cover, but a bullet caught him in the leg, and he went down hard, screaming. The sound cut through me, raw and human, unlike anything I'd heard before. I wanted to help, but my body wouldn't move. My arms shook, my chest heaved, and my finger kept squeezing the trigger as if it were the only thing tethering me to life. I don't even know if I hit anything. I just fired and fired, praying the noise of my rifle would drown out my fear. The enemy was invisible, hidden in the foliage. We were trapped in their killing ground. Every muzzle flash was a phantom, here and gone before you could aim. The jungle itself seemed to attack us, branches whipping, vines tangling, mud pulling at our knees as we tried to shift positions. The air was alive with death, and I could feel it hunting me. Time lost meaning. Minutes felt like hours. My throat burned from smoke and screams. My ears rang with the endless thunder of combat. At some point, the sergeant crawled beside me, his face smeared with mud, his eyes fierce and steady. He shouted something, orders, encouragement, I don't know. His mouth moved, but I couldn't hear over the ringing in my head. He slapped my shoulder hard, snapping me back. I nodded, though I wasn't sure to what. Then came the grenades, our grenades. Someone lobbed one into the trees, and the explosion tore through the undergrowth with a deafening roar. Another followed, and another. Branches rained down, smoke billowed. The enemy fire faltered. For the first time there was a sliver of space, a gasp of air. "Move! Push through!" the sergeant bellowed. We surged forward in fits and starts, crawling, stumbling, firing into the haze. My body felt detached, moving on instinct, like I was watching myself from far away. The jungle floor was littered with casings, broken branches, and bodies ours and theirs. I tried not to look, but my eyes betrayed me. A hand here, a boot there, a face I recognized and one I didn't. The line between enemy and friend blurred into the same haunting stillness. Finally, the gunfire eased. The storm quieted, leaving only the echoes of chaos. Smoke drifted through the clearing, curling around the shattered trees. My ears still rang, a dull whine that muted the world. The silence was almost worse than the noise at Preston, demanding I face what was left. I lifted my head, my body aching, my hands numb from gripping the rifle. Around me, men slowly rose from the mud, eyes wide, faces pale beneath layers of dirt and sweat. Some were wounded, groaning softly, clutching at bloody rags of uniform. Others just sat, staring blankly ahead, their minds far away. The sergeant moved among us, checking, counting, marking the living and the dead. His jaw was tight, his movements sharp, but I saw it in his eyes, the weight, the grief, the fury. He knelt by the fallen, pausing just long enough to honour them before moving on. I wanted to speak, to ask what had happened, how long it lasted, if it was over, but my voice failed me. My mouth was dry, my tongue thick. All I could do was breathe deep, ragged breaths that tasted of smoke, blood, and fear. That was my first ambush, my first taste of combat in the jungles of Vietnam. It didn't feel like a victory, even though we were alive. It felt like a warning. The jungle had shown its teeth, but I knew this was only the beginning. When the last shots faded and the smoke thinned, the jungle returned to its silence. It was as if nothing had happened, as if the earth itself refused to acknowledge the chaos we had just endured. But the silence was different now. It carried weight heavy, suffocating, filled with the echoes of what we'd lost. We gathered the wounded first. Medics moved quickly, their hands steady despite the blood that slicked everything they touched. Some men cried out in pain, others bit down hard, refusing to make a sound. The rest of us stood guard or tried to help, our movements stiff, clumsy, drained of strength. Every face was pale, every eye hollowed by what it had seen. Then came the dead. We carried them with as much dignity as the mud and the vines would allow, laying them gently on ponchos, covering them with whatever scraps of cloth we had. I avoided looking at their faces, but sometimes I couldn't help it. They were young, like me, boys who had laughed at bad jokes just hours ago, who had sweated and cursed at the same jungle heat. Now they were still, silent, swallowed by a war that seemed endless. I sat down at the edge of the clearing, my rifle across my knees. My hands shook, my ears still rang, my chest felt heavy. I stared at the ground, at the mud clinging to my boots, and tried to make sense of it all. Back home, combat had been an idea, something distant and unreal, a story in books or training manuals. Here, it was raw and unforgiving. It wasn't about strategy or glory, it was about survival, breathing one more breath, taking one more step, holding on for just another minute. The sergeant came by, his face hard, unreadable. He clapped my shoulder, not saying a word. He didn't need to. That simple touch told me everything. We had made it through, but we were changed. None of us were the same men who had stepped into the jungle that morning. As the sun began to sink, the canopy above caught the fading light, turning it into long streaks of gold and shadow. It was almost beautiful, cruelly beautiful, as if the jungle mocked us with its calm. I thought about home, about the people who would never know this silence, this fear, this weight. I wondered if I would ever truly leave this place, even if my body made it out. That night, when we finally set up camp, I lay awake listening to the jungle breathe around me. Every rustle made me flinch. Every whisper of wind set my heart racing. Sleep never came. Instead, I stared into the darkness, replaying the ambush again and again. The flashes of gunfire, the screams, the faces, they looped endlessly, carving themselves into my memory. I realized then that this was only day one. The war stretched ahead like the jungle itself, vast, endless, unforgiving. I didn't know how many more ambushes, how many more losses, how many more nights like this were waiting. All I knew was that I would carry this day with me forever. That was my first day in Vietnam, my first day in the jungle, and it was only the beginning.